Hello and welcome to Ethereum Core Developer Meeting number 81. This is Hudson. Let's see real quick. Okay, I just muted someone who was typing. Um, let's go ahead and start with the agenda. Um, this is going to be a super packed agenda today, so let's try to be cognizant of uh, getting through your topics really quickly and with like minimal interruption and not too much off-topic discussion when it comes to the technical aspects. If it can be talked about in Gitter or the Magicians, just make sure to keep that in mind. Thank you all very much. And now we're going to start with. Actually, we were going to start with EFI, but is anyone here for OpenRPC? Because I remember from last meeting we said that we would start with that. Um, is anyone here for that? Okay, we can skip that for now. Let's start with the EFI stuff. And let's tag team this with James. Is that okay with you, James?
Yeah, I would actually discuss any of the EFI or EIPs that are looking to be in Berlin, and then have the general EFI discussion happen after.
Okay. Do you want to just take it away?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thanks.
Let me grab the agenda so I have the list of the numbers of EIPs. Clicking around. So for Berlin coming up, there's been a couple EIPs that are almost ready to get in, and then there's recently been the ETH2 deposit contract is looking to use a precompile so they can validate the BLS curves within the contract itself, which they can't do in Solidity. So that gives us a schedule to schedule around. And so the EIPs that are close to being ready, and then that EIP should be a scheduling window. The ones I have seen as at that stage would be Greg's EIP, Greg Colvin, 32315, 1962, or the BLS one that the ETH2 team has created, and has created a proposal for a simplified version that only has the curves that they need. So we can talk about that at the time that happens. We can do that as the last EIP and that list. Then there's Dano's EIP, which is about scheduling, doing the schedules for the scheduling, but with block time for the forks, and just making it so it's easier so we can predict when those happen. Then there's the difficulty bomb EIP that I wrote for updating the difficulty bomb changes, the algorithm. And that one is 2515. So let's first go into Greg. Are you here? Colvin?
He's on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm here.
So we could talk about that one first as possibly for inclusion for Berlin. And then after this discussion, I had for scheduling, starting to talk about scheduling. And then we also can talk about ProgPal, which is on the agenda today as well.
Sorry, if I may, I think it's wrong to talk about inclusion for Berlin. I think we should talk about eligible for inclusion, period. And then once the test cases exist and implementations work, we can see if it's, kind of what upgrade window it goes into. But I don't think we should do that like we've done previously and say this goes for Berlin, and then kind of halt everything due to something that doesn't make it into that slot.
Yeah, I agree. We need to get the implementations much closer to ready and then say, let's go.
Okay,
But I do agree that we could make call today, like, and say yes, we're all for this EAP or some other EAP, and go for it. That I think we should do and can do.
Yeah, then that was more of what I was intending. And as far as the scheduling goes, the only one to really figure out when it could happen is the signature for the ETH2 contract, and then whatever ends up is ready by that time can also be. It just would be helpful for me to get an idea of who wants to kind of hit that timeline, and then as a group are getting the general okay for that. Not saying it will or will not.
Could you remind us what the timeline is?
Greg, the other Greg, are you here? From the ETH2 team. So the ETH2 deposit contract is supposed to be July, I believe, July 29th.
I thought, maybe I'm wrong here, but I thought that the E2 deposit contract would happen, the E2 beacon chain launch was to happen around July, which means the deposit contract would probably be, weeks to month-ish before that.
Yes.
So I think like June is probably, oh, and this is Tim. I realized I logged in from the Cat Herders accounts, my bad.
Yeah, I should mention that 1962 ELSA has a complete implementation, so it's not a showstopper.
Yes. So the bigger conversation is by June, which of those could be ready so that the deposit contract could be made, and then which of the EIPs would we accept as like EFI for that kind of for that, so that the authors of the EIPs can either get ready and make it for this window or make it in the next window as the next fork happens. Does that kind of does that feel all right, Martin, the way I said that?
Yeah.
Okay. So then for Greg's EIP, is there any updates, and do we have the sentiment that if it was ready at that time that it would be able to go in?
Well, it's fine by me, but I'm not currently implementing a client. So I think Martin, Alan, who else? Dano here?
Yeah, Dano's here. I would say, Greg, can you give like a 2-sentence overview of what your EIP is again, just as a reminder? I see there's a lot of new people here today.
Okay. The proposal's out there. Essentially it adds 3 opcodes at this point, possibly 2. There's just a begin sub opcode to mark the beginning of a subroutine. Martin and I have been discussing that. Maybe just a jump test would do. But you have to have something to go to. And then two opcodes. One of them is just jump sub, go to a subroutine, and the other one is return sub, come back. For most implementations, you would simply have a return stack. So when you jump to a subroutine, you push the current PC onto the stack, and when you return from the subroutine, you pop the stack and resume execution where you jumped from. And so it's really just that simple. It's a 2-stack design, just like Forth. So it's basically getting BVM up to 1970 standards.
Yes,
Yeah.
just want to add something to Greg's comments. Basically, I think that's basically what other machines are doing. So with some subroutine jumps and return address stack. yes, so that's pretty standard. So and also the LVN compiler could support that with a few modifications. So yes, I think this is a good EIP that we should put it in. Thanks.
So one thing that we've been discussing with Martin about the CIP is that on the surface it looks really nice. We are wondering how much time would it be to hack Solidity so that it actually can use this, so that we might somehow try and run some benchmarks against existing contracts. Because it would be really nice to be able to see the actual number of what this would mean from a
Yes, but it's up to the Solidity compiler to do the changes, and it has nothing to do with any Solidity language level modifications. Basically, it's just a compiler change and the EN change.
Yeah, I know, but my question is that it seems so. The whole point of the subroutine is of the subroutines are to make the generated code faster. But it would be nice to actually confirm that it does indeed make it faster before shipping it.
Is anyone here from Solidity?
Doesn't sound like anyone's here. But I can
like from the perspective of the compiler, I think our LVN based compiler could support it very easily.
So the request was not to have all the compiler changes ready just before the hard fork, including this EIP. But the idea was that since it is unclear if it provides an actual benefit to the performance of, let's say, Solidity smart contracts, I think it would be very good to validate this EIP before deploying it in a hard fork by basically just trying out the changes. I mean, the EVM changes are implemented at this time, so it is possible to actually spin up a small laptop network and then use a modified compiler and then just run some benchmarks. And this is basically what we were thinking on the Geth side would be the next step for this EIP, because it is such a low-level change, and just I think it deserves to be evaluated before inclusion.
Okay, it's unfortunate the Solidity people haven't come.
I can help connect you with them as far as assuming that we have the Solidity benchmarks. Is there any opposition to having this in, or strong feelings?
No, we discussed this a bit in the Geth team, and I think as a whole we're supportive of this and approve of it to be eligible for inclusion. There was one thing though. So one thing Greg already mentioned, that's another stack, a parallel stack. So that's kind of big change to the EVM, but it's not a showstopper in our opinion. Another thing worth pointing out is that if we do have the begin sub opcode, it means that when doing the jump test analysis, we also need to mark out begin subs. And for Geth, this is easy. We do a one pass and mark code sections and data sections, but other implementations which specifically look for the jump test opcode, they would have to either convert to our style, or they would have to do one more jump test analysis, basically a begin sub analysis. Yeah, just an implementation detail.
At the end of the EIP, there's an example laying out how subroutines are going to show up in the assembly code. So I think it's pretty clear there, the difference in gas count, actual measured performance, I think would have to be better, but that would have to be measured, but certainly it's going to save on gas substantially.
Yeah, so we are expecting the same thing. It would just be nice to actually confirm the numbers before we ship this EIP.
Of course.
So we can have, let's add that as the next step for the EIP and consider that good.
Sounds good to me.
So I have a quick question though. So I think so. There's also an implementation attached to the EIP against the Geth code base. And
Yeah, there's a PR.
the EIP mentions 3 opcodes, whereas the implementation only does 2.
Yeah, the implementation is earlier.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I was just wondering which one is the canonical version then. But yeah, okay, then the EIP. Cool, thanks.
Yeah, I did the PR earlier just to be sure the things would actually work going into Geth.
Okay, great. Dano, do you have any updates on your EIP? I'm not remembering the number right now.
2456.
2456.
So one thing I was thinking of, the possible change, one of the, I don't think Jason Carver's on the call. I'm not close to my Zoom screen. His concern was going back 1,000 blocks to check might be too much load for lighter clients that don't store as many blocks. So one thing that crossed my mind is instead of going back 1,000 blocks to check the trigger, we could go back just 10 blocks to check the trigger. And with those 10 blocks back, that's going to be far enough so that the armors won't have, the armor limit is 6, so we won't have stray armors for when we trigger the upgrade. So if 10 before 1,000 is after the time, then at 1,000, we would do the upgrade. So that is one change I'm considering. I posted that on Ink Magicians, and I haven't gotten any feedback on that particular suggestion. So, mostly I think we're just haggling over how far the look back is and whether it's going to be, 0 or 10 or 1,000 for this. And probably a discussion is better to have on the Ink Magicians than on the call, but I'm willing to have it on the call if people want to discuss it.
Assuming that number gets worked out and you have that conversation with Jason, Dano, is there any strong feelings about having this be included or not included after that point from the group? That's more of what I would like to get out of this conversation.
I think we would need some testing. The current testing structure for these activations, I don't think quite would support the look backs. So it needs some updates to the reference test files. And I'd also like to see some live transitions before we go to a test net. So there's more of a testing burden on this than it looks like. Most of the work on this is in the test code. So that's mostly where I think the big work for this is.
Yeah, and maybe in particular because in testing scenario, we're going to run into problems with we have to use synthetic times, right?
Yeah, multiple updates at one time.
Yeah. I think he means that you have to do fake times in order to test that the time is actually happening right.
Yes.
No, I was thinking like a single purpose test. I've seen a purpose test net where we would have people come on and get a few miners, come in an hour before it forks, do the fork, and then dispose of it just like we've done with some of the other test nets before. A transient test net, not a persistent test net.
Yeah, I was thinking more about actual test cases, high test, but maybe that's not a problem because it can just ignore the system clock and use old timestamps for old blocks, so that's not a problem.
Yeah, so timestamp is in the actual block header, and that's the timestamp we would use. So we can totally set up a stream of fake data to validate as well.
So for testing in the live transition things, is that something you see as could be done in the next month and a half, or that you'd be wanting to pursue for hitting a June window?
Well, it's not have to happen. I think we should come back to this in 2 weeks and make sure our schedule will support that.
Okay.
So just a question for me. I can't really make head or tails. Did we decide anything regarding E2315? Because as far as I know, only the Geth team gave a thumbs up. And I'm not sure if that's sufficient. I would assume not. But
Well,
I like it.
yeah, so I think Dano said good. I have a question for Wei and anyone who was on the Parity team, like Parity Ethereum client team. What is your involvement right now in the Open Ethereum initiative, and is that something that we should consider you guys having like an up-down opinion on this? Because what I heard was that Parity Technologies won't be supporting Parity Ethereum slash Open Ethereum after Q2.
Uh, we will. I mean, we will still provide support for Open Ethereum for at least the next artwork, and there are a lot of other teams. For example, the Geniuses, they are taking a lot of the development job over. So yeah, so I think we should be fine. We should Open Ethereum should continue to be considered a usable client implementation for Ethereum.
Great, yeah. And the question wasn't as much that, because I knew it was going to continue. It was more, can I turn to like you or someone else from the team? Do you know who I should ask for an up or down on certain questions, like if EIP 2315 is okay for the client? I think you're the only one from Parity here, so you might be the one to give an up down if you're comfortable with that.
Yeah, you mean the EIP for the structured. Which one is it?
The simple subroutines, the one Greg had.
Oh yeah. So I think that should be fine for us. It requires an extra step, but I don't see any big problem of that.
Awesome. And then I don't know if Nethermind's here today. That would be the only other really active client except C++ who doesn't always come to these meetings. Am I right, James, or who am I missing?
No, that's right.
Trinity?
Oh, that's right. Pfft, sorry, Trinity. That's another good one. They've been focusing so much on BeamSync and 1x, I forget when they come to the calls. Who's from Trinity here? Most of the time they're good with stuff, so if they're not here, I think we have enough teams saying that it's okay to move with Greg's ahead as an EFI.
I agree.
Well, sorry for interrupting, James. You can continue.
Oh, that's perfect. So, Greg's EIP, which is the number of 2315, moving to EFI. Dano's EIP, did we move it to EFI or did we? I believe we had like a general thumbs up, but you wanted to talk to Jason. Did we move it at that time, or did we say we were going to move it after that time?
I'm not sure if we officially thumbed it up, did we?
I thought we did last time. I thought we officially said it's an EFI, meaning we've given a thumbs up for it being a good idea, but I don't know. You know what? Actually, you're right. I don't know if we did or not. Dano, do you remember?
I didn't think it was EFI.
Oh, say that one more time. It cut out.
I didn't think we gave it an EFI.
You don't think we gave it an EFI? Okay. Sounds good. We can continue to not have it in that status as long as you haven't talked to Jason.
Yeah, I think moving the time from 0 to 10 to 1,000 is such a fundamental enough change that it shouldn't be considered stable enough to go past where it's at.
So then let's wait for that conversation to happen, and then we can revisit this as EFI.
Exactly. Come back in 2 weeks. I'll try and get a hold of James in the next 2 weeks.
Okay. So that is it for that EIP. The next one, I wrote a proposal for. This one is 2515, which is an EIP to address the difficulty bomb or update it. And I wrote the proposal last week and sent it out and had a lot of good feedback from the core devs and people on Twitter. And the general idea is to have a block activation number where the difficulty freezes, and then after that point, increase the difficulty at a consistent rate. And so there's an eventual that leads off until eventually the network can't support, the block times become too big for the network. And I'm not exactly sure how to run a conversation on an EIP I'm doing. So maybe that should be you, Hudson.
Sure. So looking at this EIP, let me just pull it up real quick. So it's EIP 21 what was it, 2515. I believe it's only in is it even in draft right now? It looks like it's just written.
It's in a PR. It hasn't been merged.
Perfect. Okay. That sounds good. I was just making sure I was on the right page. Um all right, there's a few things. So, since my assumption is you're not a client dev, so you wouldn't be able to put this in, but I think that as far as implementation and testing goes, but let's just talk about in just a paragraph or two the general idea of how this is laid out, and then we'll get some opinion, and then after that we'll see if there's a lot of support, some support, no support, that kind of thing.
So the general layout is that the difficulty bomb has gone off a few times, sometimes due to moving a chain, having to delay a fork, and so it goes off for a while. And then most recently, it went off because I had miscalculated it, and then it wasn't double checked, so we weren't sure when it happens, and that's primarily because the difficulty bomb is affected by the network. There's the adjustment factor that happens within within the block, like trying to make sure the ETH is between 10 and 20 seconds. And when the difficulty bomb is unsurmountable by that adjustment period, it depends on the current difficulty on the network. And because we don't know what the difficulty will be in the future, we can estimate it. And there was a great calculator from
Ethermine, or
yeah,
well, they have like three names: Bitfly, Ethermine, Etherchain.
yeah, they made a great calculator for predicting the difficulty bomb as it is now. It still relies on assuming what the difficulty will be at a certain point, and over time that will get more accurate. And I think it would just be a lot easier if we split those two abstractions and kept the difficulty bomb, because as I've heard from the community, there's a lot of people who have strong feelings about keeping it, but we can at least make it more usable for knowing when it will happen and its effect, and so it's easy. We can address it easier as core devs.
So, any questions on that? Anybody have comments?
So I'm asking, as I understood it first, we would freeze the difficulty, but you were talking also about some linear increase?
Yes, the original proposal was to freeze the difficulty and leave it at that. But after feedback from the community, it made sense to have it freeze and then linearly increase at that point. So at block 10,500,000, the parent difficulty equals the block difficulty. The block difficulty equals the parent difficulty plus 10% or plus 1%. And that will just continue to increase.
Is that reflected in the actual specification on Ethereum Magicians or anywhere else?
It's in the PR. I just need to read. It's in the PR, yes. I need to write that the PR has been updated on the ETH Magicians. And this is also after talking with TJ for a long time at ETH Denver, who is one of the big critics of my approach.
Yeah, as for my part, I think this is kind of a good trade-off between removing it entirely and having it in its current form, which obviously isn't that great. So I'm tentatively positive, but I'd love to hear other people's take on it.
It might be a situation where people need a little more time to read it, and if that's the case, I'd say it's a good idea, James, to just shop it around to the different teams in the All Core Devs Getter, or just people you talk to individually. And then once it's in if it's in draft status by next meeting, that would be um, good to, yeah, that'd be good to do.
I have a question. Maybe this is a dumb question, but wouldn't like freezing the difficulty and then linearly increasing it make it? It kind of goes against the whole difficulty adjustment. So I'm not sure. I haven't read the whole EAP, but maybe just trying to clarify how those two mechanisms would like interact. So what's like the trade-off of not having the difficulty adjustment? Yeah, and the potential security implications.
So after the difficulty adjustment would be removed after the point of block activation.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. But right, so say this is kind of a toy scenario, but say you freeze the difficulty and then 2x the amount of miners start mining on Ethereum. Are we going to have 7-second blocks instead of 15-second blocks because our difficulty is kind of frozen? And I understand over time it'll grow, but if the amount of hash power kind of grows quicker than the rate at which the difficulty bomb slows the network, we have like a quicker network. So I'm just not sure. Like,
no, yeah, you're totally right, and so once it's frozen, there is an incentive for miners to jump on, assuming that the main chain is the one we're talking about right now.
Yeah,
for miners to jump on and increase the hash rate, and because the difficulty is now adjusting up slowly, that it would, like, block times would increase quite a bit for a short amount of time, and they would accelerate their pace into the linear increase. And the risk there is that if block times are too fast, the uncle rate could be high enough to result in sort of a fracturings of the network, or just block times becoming very, very quickly for a short time until eventually there isn't enough miners on the planet to.
Yeah, and I think the mining reward would also play into that, right? Like, how profitable is it for them and whatnot. But I think, to me, that's like one thing where I'd like to see someone who understands it much better than me, like the various incentives, and kind of talk through the possible cases. Like, what happens if there's like 50% more miners, there's like half the amount of miners, because we kind of lose this like dynamically adjusting parameter.
And I wrote a little bit about that in the EIP as well.
Cool.
Is there any other thoughts on that before, and we can decide more on it next 2 weeks?
Yeah, so I'm curious as to why freeze at all and not just the linear increase from a certain point in time.
That is what I guess the freeze to me is removing the difficulty adjustment piece, and then it will just linearly increase. And that's
right.
Is that what you mean?
No, not quite. I meant, why not instead keep the adjustment, but also add not an exploding bomb, but a linear increase bomb, which has less chaotic kind of effects. So that we, for example, once we hit this new soft bomb, it starts to target 15-second block time, and then 16-second block time, and then 18-second block time, but doing so in not as large hops.
The reason that I think that would have the same problem is not really being able to predict effectively when that first increase would happen, because as long as the difficulty adjustment piece is in there and the increase is some static function that can adapt to it, then there is this requirement to guess or to predict what the difficulty of the network is in order to be able to predict the effect of the bomb.
So I think what I'm proposing would be to instead just change the desired block time. Remove the bomb and modify the desired block time.
So there isn't, because of how the adjustment algorithm only adjusts up and down depending on if it's between a 10 and 20-second block window.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really have a capacity to target a block time, as far as my understanding. We have an equilibrium that happens because of how the mechanism, if it's below 10 seconds, then it increases the difficulty. If it's above 20 seconds, then it decreases the difficulty for every amount of 20 seconds it's above. For every 10 seconds, it's above that.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how we could move that window. The other concern I would have with that approach is the people that are most affected by this going off, for us, for it going off, is the miners, and that never was really the intention of the difficulty bomb, was to make it so miners are less able to pay for their electricity that month. So as like, while it is less impactful for us, like, we are also not viscerally impacted by having block times increase in the same way as other stakeholders on the network. And so making it so it is more real to us what the consequences are, as in visceral for us in this room, then we, who are the ones who can address it, will also be more likely to address it in a timely manner.
Any other comments? Okay, we can probably just go to the next one and just shop it around some more, I guess, James. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Yep, I can do that. And if there's a way to target like that, Martin, I would definitely be open to how to to adjust the mechanism to be targeted around that. I just would need to figure out how that works, how that would work. So then the next EIP is Alex Vlasov. You're here, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just following the discussion which was on the last call, people wanted to get someone outside of this call and implementation of the EIP every time. So I have invited a few people. Zach and Kobe are here. Unfortunately, Joseph from EY couldn't join due to personal reasons. I got an email from him an hour ago. Also, unfortunately, this week wasn't the best one to also get more people, because now it's time for blockchain conference, and it's 6 a.m. in here.
Yep.
A little bit inconvenient, but still, I think people who were actually interested in getting something new in terms of elliptic curve cryptography and Ethereum are here. So, in principle, if you want to ask them about the difficulty of the precompile or something else, you can talk with them. I also chatted on Telegram with people who implemented cryptography like Shunbo, and definitely for them it's not a problem. Any difficulty of such precompile and its edge cases. Documentation also didn't raise any questions for them. So, and in general, in total, what was also like adjusted over the last 2 weeks between the calls, gas prices were recalculated to increase the constant of gas per second. Now it's 30, even while it's way above what my laptop has. or BN precompile. I mean, current implementation of the BN precompile. Oh, Yusuf sent his colleagues. That's great. Yeah. So LC gas formulas were adjusted a little, but it's not a large difference. Otherwise, all implementations are ready, and what we do now is just Said, who is most likely listening to this call but never joins, another of Go implementation. He ports gas metering routine to Go, which is the most trivial part of the precompile. So in principle, all implementations are ready in Rust, C++, and Go. So I think Zach or Kobe can say something.
Yeah, I'm happy to add a couple of thoughts. If now's a good time. So yeah, I just kind of wanted to give like a bit of an external viewpoint on kind of the value of this EIP. So it's I imagine quite a few companies working in this space. Like the current precompile situation means that it's difficult to deploy kind of state-of-the-art or cutting-edge cryptography to Ethereum, especially given the amount of there's been a lot of new developments and techniques that have come out in the past year that we can't currently leverage because of the limited precompile support. And I guess, yeah, this ERP is kind of, I see it as a way of future-proofing Ethereum so that it can become a test bed for a lot of advanced cryptographic techniques. And that in turn should provide a lot of value to the community, to the wider ecosystem, particularly in the form of rollups, in the form of using Starks and Snarks for proofs of data availability and for scaling. Oh, sorry, hang on. So I just lost my place there for a minute. Oh, yes. And basically, there's also been some research lately, spearheaded by Kirby actually, which highlights the fact that if you want 128 bits of security for Snarks, rollup scaling solutions, that kind of thing, the BLS 12381 curve isn't really sufficient. So whilst it would be a big improvement for Ethereum to have BLS 12 precompiles, the ability to use more secure curves, which CIP supports, would be extremely valuable. When it comes to implementation, I'm happy to add a few thoughts. Otherwise, I just echo what Alex says. It is a complicated EAP, and there is a lot of a lot of potential attacks that need to be closed off. But fundamentally, it's not new cryptography that's being deployed or new techniques. And also, the teams that would be using these precompiles as part of the tech stack, they all have quite significant, the ones that I know have quite significant in-house cryptographic expertise. So they would also be providing, auditing and validating this code themselves. They wouldn't be treating it like a black box.
Yes, so I can see the value of it. And I think all of us here agree the value of it. The concern is how do we do it in a way that is secure, given previous experience with Alt BN and others. So if your organizations or others could I mean, not audit ins in the formal way, but look at the implementation and look at the specification and just say, yes, both of these things are lining up as a vote of confidence for those things, that would be very helpful for us.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that.
I would like to voice some opposition here. I've done it before. I'm opposed to this EAP because it's so broad and so, sorry, that's maybe the wrong wording, but it's very huge and it's a generic precompile. It's basically a virtual machine for modern crypto, which I don't think is suitable for Ethereum. I think we should add precompiles for well-defined use cases. And if we need some particular precompile for some well-defined use case, such as Zcash interoperability or ETH 2.0, then we can add a precompile for that. But I think it's too large a step to take to add this big generic precompile. And there are several concerns. One is the actual crypto correctness. And there I can only, trust that cryptographers know what they're doing. The other large concern is that these are extremely large code bases. So even if the crypto is right, there may still be mistakes in the implementation. And like I briefly looked at the code, the Golang code base, and saw that like 12 days ago there was a commit which fixed a simple mistake that copied a value into the wrong destination in one edge case. And it's like, these things happen, but if they slip into production, then we will have a consensus issue on our hands. And when you have 10, 20,000 lines of code, there's quite a high chance that these kinds of bugs exist in the code bases.
Well, I think I should here a little bit explain about why the precompile is what was made universal at the first place. It was actually to eliminate ever a discussion about like how many people want this feature, how many people want this curve, and who is to decide whether we will increase it or not. Second, for code base size and similar things. This is the reason why we run the fuzzy testing to find such mistakes. And if you look at the implementation of, for example, if you would ever want to add BLS 12 curve, 381 bits is the base field. And if you ever, after this, would want to add BLS 12 curve 377, it's different one. It's give you like huge other set of capabilities, which people would potentially want. They will have an intersection in the code base of around 90%, just because the most of it will take field arithmetics and curve arithmetics, which is the same on every curve. Same goes, and in this precompile, this common part between the curves, which is much easier to solve and which actually has zero edge cases, actually is this, well, not 80% as in my previous example, but most likely 75%. So if I can a little bit explain how it works. For Go implementation, we originally said it's for now, it's only for modern 64-bit processors, like a performant one, specially done by handcrafted assembly, which was later cross-checked. And I mean, still independent implementation, and it's not, didn't hit the, we didn't hit the inclusion, or we didn't hit the hard fork, so we can fix the mistakes. At least the gas pricing formula was very calculated only the last week, so it's a small correction, is not a big deal. I also included a set of what can be called the downgrades, or like a whitelisting feature, which people has discussed before. Unfortunately, when I started to collect the list of the curves, which are of the kind of known of the good use in the modern for a lot of various applications by modern crypto, and for existing projects already, when I got into the list of these curves, I collected a quite huge one. It's also listed in the document and main README file in the repository. So at the end, this precompile wants to eliminate any form of centralized decision to which curves goes in, which curves does not go in, if you want to implement it in a set of specialized precompiles. But this is the state of the modern cryptography and these applications, that now with recent discoveries there are more choices, which give you a lot of different features. Not even talking about whether you snarks or starks, it just kind of separates discussion. So it's why it's universal. It's why you call it a virtual machine. I call it a calculator, which is actually much simpler if you ever implemented it at least once.
So,
go ahead.
Yeah.
I want to sorry. I just want to react on top of that. You say, I mean, I understand the logic of implementing one and for all crypto and be done with it. At the same time, you can ignore that it's a attack vector, and I'm just going to go back to one specific mistake that happened with Windows. We had a very thorough crypto team that happened like just 1 month ago. So my concern at this point concerning CIP is having it's not in crypto itself, because the math works and we can verify the math. It's okay. The problem is in the implementation level. And what concerns me here is that we don't have, like, I know you told me that there is another team, but I haven't come up to present. And also we don't have like sort of other known figure and Kobe or being one of them, or like being one of them, actually doing the implementation and saying that the current spec is enough for anyone to implement according to the spec. How would you address this concern?
We cannot ask someone like specifically if he doesn't want to implement or do the duplicate work, because as far as I know, Zach usually writes in C++, and C++ implementation exists. If he wants to fine tune it or change it or fork it just for his own interest, he's free to do this. But if no one volunteers to make an alternative implementation according to the spec, because the set of languages in which it's already implemented is kind of wide enough and what are most usable, we cannot force anyone to do this. According to the Windows hack, which you mentioned, as far as I know, the problem was not even in cryptography itself. It was in parsing format. And this is equivalent to the API part of this precompile, which is luckily much simpler than the DARE encoding format in usual certificates. But I mean, attack surfaces chapter is also covered in the documentation. So there were only 3 main parts, and I spent a few pages to explain why they are not, like how they addressed, and like why this way of addressing attack surfaces is enough. I mean, the precompiled documentation and README document was updated quite a lot over the past weeks. And I mean, I cannot force people to actually look at it and pay attention because it's quite a large document. But I mean, for this question, there is a formal answer.
Well, no, well, I think that's a bit of a strong argument. I mean, I have read the attack surface description. I just don't agree with the conclusions there, actually. Yeah, what can I say? There's one little paragraph about it being consensus breaking, where you say that it cannot be consensus breaking because of conventions. Yeah, I don't agree. Sorry.
So I would like to also expand on that. So yeah, I think with this EAP, our main concern is really really like with the complexity of this particular precompile, and this would definitely also be my concern. It is definitely possible to create large programs which behave correctly and are in consensus across multiple implementations, as the Ethereum implementation shows. But especially with this precompile, I think it might be stretching the limit a little bit as to how big a precompile can be. And I do understand that basically it is quite important for applications today to have access to these kinds of cryptographic features, but I do disagree with the notion that the process of adding precompiles is like too complicated right now to make that happen. So I think as client implementers, I don't think there's any problem with adding any particular precompile as long as it is reasonably simple and there is a use case for it. And these things are like with this particular EIP, there is definitely use case for it, but it is not simple. And I think as such, it doesn't really meet the criteria for like a good precompile.
So I don't want to spend like too much time on this. Alex, go ahead and do a rebuttal, and then I'll say my point.
I mean, I wanted to answer this question, this kind of like a stack order. Like for difficulty, may I ask, like, there is a list of curves which would be potentially of interest to use. Unfortunately, this is quite large, so it would, at the end of the day, will result in making, let's say, 8 different heaps. Each of those will take something like 3 to 6 precompile addresses. And I can easily, and I mean, I can definitely split this precompile by just doing calculations for some hard-coded set of parameters, and even by using the same code base as a reference to like say, well, let's include these 8 curves. But the problem, and all of those curves are usable, and people want to use them for some or one or another particular application. What would be the chance to actually get this included in a time frame of a few months? And I mean, it's 8 precompiles with a huge set of addresses, but they all have this vanishingly smaller difficulty in this case. Even while
Hudson, is it
specific, I just want to, I mean, because this is what I wanted to avoid with this precompile, that avoid this specific decision for every time. What would be the concrete chances for this case?
Hudson, is it okay if I give my view as well? I know that you want to move on, but
Yeah, sure
I
thing.
wanted to comment.
Yeah.
Right. I just want to comment on some things that happened. So I won't go again into saying the value of the IP. I think we all understand it's valuable, and we have a bunch of use cases that we want to use it for. So I won't go into that. I will say to Alex's credit, or like to MetroLab's credit, this IP has explicit formulas how to implement the specific crypto features that are needed, which is quite unusual. Usually people implement from papers, and the papers are scattered and all around, and people go to different websites and implement different ways to add or multiply points. So having these explicit formulas is super helpful to make independent implementation. So this is a very good positive point about the CAP. One thing that, for example, I don't completely understand yet, or I can't internalize yet, is the gas schedule calculations, which kind of, like, I understand the ideas, but it's hard for me to internalize it. And I think this is somewhat related to how people perceive the complexity of this EAP, because it feels like it's a very big unit that you must take as a whole, all or nothing. And that is kind of scary, and that is kind of problematic, or not, maybe not problematic, but this makes you look at this 20,000 or whatever lines code base and say, yeah, this is very big. And I can't say I disagree with it. And I think it might come down, and maybe we could discuss that at some point, of how to make this point at least lighter. So like Alex mentioned, yeah, you could divide this. So you won't have like 5 precompiles, you would have 60 precompiles for all the different curves that we want. And maybe even EAP 1962 would be the underlying implementation. And then you could have specific gas formulas for each curve and so on. But that would also mean that you would require a hard fork every time you want a curve, which, to be honest, I'm not totally against.
You would still need a hard fork every time you add a curve, even with this particular ERP. It's not an open-ended thing.
I mean, not with this one.
No,
not
with this
one.
one.
Yeah,
Like,
but
with this one you don't need a fork. But I mean,
Yeah,
just
but-
a clarification.
As I mean, that's kind of like saying, oh, it's such a pain to push a new EAP through the process, so we'll kind of clump this all together and
So
pretend it's a
actually,
big one.
Actually, I was building up to a point, so maybe I'll finish that. So you could divide this into 60 APs, 60 precompiles, and do that. But then it would require a hard fork every time, which is maybe fine. And I think something that we could discuss is to, if, for example, we do go through the process of adding, for example, 6, 8 precompiles per curve, and even if the underlying implementation is 1962, does this improve the complexity worries? Or, for example, even including one curve is already scary, and even that should be really evaluated further. And these are things we could discuss as to how we can actually move something like this forward, because I totally understand the worries and the complexity of what it introduces. And I think it's mostly about the discussion of how can we modularize it so it is not perceived as complex.
So just to add something to it. So our biggest concern with with regard to complexity is that I'm almost certain that there are bugs in it, because I don't believe that 3 times 20,000 lines of code is bugless. So from my perspective, there will be a consensus issue, that's for sure. And the question is that parity is currently maintained by, I don't know, 2 people, and in the progress of being switched over to Open Ethereum with God knows what governance model and who will be actually maintaining it. Geth is, again, maintained by a handful of people, and if shit hits the fan, who is going to fix it?
That's
Because
what I was going
frankly,
to address actually. So just real quick, Peter, I was wanting to get like buy-in from some of the cryptographers in the community, including people on this call who either built or support this EIP, to be in a Gitter or Telegram or something bridge channel, so that if shit hits the fan, we can call on you all to jump in and within a very reasonable amount of time fix things. And when I say fix things, more identify the problem, that kind of thing. So Peter, what about that idea?
so to jump in within a reasonable amount of time, I would like to mention the time when, during the Shanghai attack, you called me at 4 a.m. in the morning to get up and solve some issue. So is a group of cryptographers willing to be able to be called at 4 a.m. in the morning and fix it at 4 a.m.? Because if not, then that's a huge problem, because we cannot fix it.
I think with the
And
time zones, probably is what I'd be guessing, but I want to hear from them. What do you think, Alex, Kobe, etc.?
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
yeah, Zach, please continue.
I mean, this CIP, if it went through, I mean, Aztec would definitely use it, and we'd be very happy to fix it if shit civil hits the fan, 100%.
So if we could collect who those people are willing to be.
I mean, I saw this as a bold responsibility. I mean, I didn't know that it existed, but I thought it's by default, so I can count it as yes from my side. I cannot answer for Said, who is an author of Go implementation, but I will ask him to write in the Gitter for this. He usually listens to the call, but never joins.
And I'd take responsibility for keeping this channel up to date as far as people on it. And then, Alex, if you continue to run this type of fuzz testing, or someone runs this fuzz testing, I think that'll also be something that'll help, regardless of. I mean, it's not going to fix the concerns that the Geth team has, for sure, but anything, if this goes through, anything that we can have in addition to just putting it in and everybody leaving, like having this supported until well after ETH2 becomes a thing, I think is going to help, um, like some concerns, not all concerns. Peter, you can continue because I interrupted you earlier.
so I'm not sure where I want to get at, but where now I want to make something particularly clear is that if this EIP goes in, the Geth team will take absolutely zero responsibility for it. I mean, we don't have the knowledge to do this.
And what you're saying is, when you say not taking responsibility, that's not by choice as much as you don't have the knowledge, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I would gladly fix something, and obviously, if shit hits the fan, I would be super pissed, and I would I would be staying there. But if it's something that I don't understand, then so I think it's also really important to consider what are the consequences on the network of the whole thing. So yes, everyone wants everything to go really smoothly, and yeah, of course. But what happens if let's suppose the implementation is huge, so you can have two types of issues. One of them is you can have a consensus issue, which, for example, currently, if there's a bug in, let's suppose, in the Go implementation, and 80% of the network goes off in a different direction, and let's suppose or whatever, let's suppose 80% of the miners go in the direction which has the bug, then the only way to solve it is to roll back the chain, which is like this horrible situation, or pause the chain, like IOTA style. So are we willing to do that? Probably not. Then if even if the whole implementations are in consensus and there is a bug in the cryptography itself, I cannot verify it. I can say that the different implementations do the same thing, but whether that makes sense or not is beyond me. But if something like that happens, then great game, it's a catastrophic failure for Ethereum. And these are the risks that we are talking about. And the reason why Martin is kind of against this and was suggesting that individual EIPs that introduce curves one by one can help is because it's much easier to say that yes, BN 256 or whatever is BLS signatures is even adding that one curve can be really dangerous, but I mean, it's a tiny surface compared to enabling a Turing-complete cryptography machine.
Well, it kind of gets us back to the ideas that we can roll it out gradually, but not by making individual curves and individual precompiles and addresses and all other things, so people don't really know what's under the hood. We can just whitelist the curves by still, I mean, as Copy mentioned it, well, even if we set it as a set of independent precompiles for different curves and still use the same machinery underneath, then it's not that different from just making a whitelist, which is in this case is just a prefix matching for whatever user wants to call this precompile with.
Can I have a proposal for this? Could we imagine providing the CIP has sort of a beta testing, like in beta testing mode, like where we offer a bounty for, like no one can use it except to display an attack on this CIP.
The
like
incentive would be problematic, maybe, because then they would wait for it to go on mainnet.
No, like it's true, but like at least researcher, like people from universities who find fun, like hacking and breaking, cryptography, which can, could try to break something that would have money on it later on.
Yeah, so that could be a way to crowdsource audits, which is nice. Yeah.
Like a hash challenge for this cryptography library. Because as Martin said, like there is 100% like 99% chance there is probably a bug there, and if there is an independent implementation, we would have a consensus issue, and at least having a hash, like a little hash challenge for this cryptography library probably could help sort of limit the sort of attack vector in the first phase, and maybe like letting it run for like 6 months or whatever until it gets like sort of trusted enough.
So maybe this is like a separate conversation, but I feel like with this EIP and what you're mentioning, Lewis, and just like having this longer testing, it kind of reminds me of what we were talking about with EIP 1559 on a previous call, where it's like we maybe want something more than activate it on a test net for 6 weeks and then fork the mainnet. I'm not sure how we do this. I don't think the 17 minutes we have left is enough to discuss like a proper plan to it. But maybe it's worth thinking about like what's a better way to test these like complex EAPs, because there's more coming down the pipeline, so that we're kind of confident with them. And I know we wanted to talk about ProgPal today as well. That's another one of those. I feel the ungasting will have the same exact conversation. So what's like how do we test hard EAPs?
That's a good question, and I just want to also.
I want to kind of time box this a little bit because we don't have much time to do the rest of it.
I wanted to
Can I bring just one more element? can just bring one more. I want just to ask who among the cryptographer of the community will be in ETH Paris, because I think an in-phase discussion will probably help a lot in solving sort of the core concern here.
I'll be there.
Peter? Or I don't know, could you just name it? Because I'm on the phone right now.
Okay, sorry, Zach.
I'll be there too. That could be there, great. So let's maybe coordinate something in ETH Paris on the Gitter and get, start discussing there.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Also, just before we end this, just a like as quick as you can, Dano and Wei, and we know Geth's position, but I haven't heard from Besu or from Parity. And there's particular concern over Parity not being kept up with. So I just want y'all's perspectives. We can go Dano first.
I'm in a car dropping off my kid, so I'm not in a good position to discuss it.
Say that one more time.
I'm driving my kid to school. I'm in a bad position to discuss it.
Oh, no problem. We'll save that for next time. Wei?
I believe this is 1962. I mean, it's there's an implementation in Russell that's good for us, but we also think this precompile is quite complicated, and so that means we are slightly against it for implementing.
Okay. This is something that is why we have this type of governance system, and I think having in-person meetings at ETHCC where it could be longer form discussion and individual discussion is going to help clear some things up, but in no way can we confirm this EIP is going in, because at this point there are clients who would not want to implement it right now, or what I should say, have serious concerns implementing it. So as unfortunate as that is, for people who are wanting to use these curves, this is just how the process goes. But I do thank everybody for coming here to discuss this, especially the people who took their time on the West Coast during Stanford Blockchain Week to discuss this particular EIP, and the cryptographers who were offering to lend support given if this goes in. Peter, did you have one last thing? I saw you pop up.
Yes, so just you mentioned that, so I don't think that, so I don't want to say that the Geth team opposes the features itself. So we have absolutely nothing against adding whatever cryptography is deemed useful and necessary. We just want to make sure that it's added in a way where you can more or less guarantee that things don't go horribly wrong.
Is that something you can guarantee with anything, though? Or I guess you're saying minimize it, right?
Yeah, minimize is I think what he was going for. It's like kind of like Ethereum, as it said, Ethereum has a large amount of complexity already, and we have been pretty good at slowly expanding the complexity and not adding like a whole bunch of complexity all at once. And I think this is something that, over time, as Ethereum 1 evolves, there will be more and more and more and more complexity in the execution, because this is where all of the interesting features are. And there are many, many things that could be done to improve what you can do in a smart contract. But this also kind of, I think there are certain things where like we really have to like slow down and then really check, okay, so like what is the thing we really need right now that will like add the most value, and then maybe we go for the next thing and then for the next thing. And I think doing it this way will basically allow us to vet each feature more or less completely. Like, I mean, the last few times we added cryptographic precompiles, there was a lot of exhaustive testing done, and I see there has been a lot of exhaustive testing on this particular EIP with all the fuzzing that's been going on this, like 32 core server that is mentioned in the README. I believe 100% that, like everything that could be done has been done to verify that, the implementation is secure and everything, and, will behave under consensus. However, just adding this large chunk of complexity all at once is just a really scary thing. And maybe we're all going to be able to absorb that scare, and like in a couple weeks or whatever, we're all going to say, why did it? What were we even thinking about? This is the best idea ever. But I think at this time it just feels like it's too much all at once.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, if I may have a 10-second closing word. First of all, 20K lines of code is most likely not the right estimate because more than half of this are testing. Second one, if Martin has a counter example for why there will be no consensus breaking, if implementation is done correctly, I would like to see this counter example, because otherwise I believe that my kind of semi-formal analysis of this, it was correct. Okay, but that's all from my side.
So going there is a precompile that we want to look into individually to getting in. And I can see that this is something that will take a longer amount of time for everyone to be comfortable with, and I don't want to continue the conversation on that.
Also, we don't have ETH2 people here today that I can see, so that
well, I've been talking with them, and I've been meeting with them, so I'm representing them.
Okay, I think Alex, who was doing this BLS 12 proposal, he's also here in Stanford. Most likely, it's just too early.
That makes sense. Yeah, Stokes is in Stanford.
And I'm here at Stanford as well. I'm representing them at this moment because it's very early for them. But Alex has an EIP written. I put it in the chat for the BLS signature, and then having a target for June so that it can be used in the ETH2 deposit contract. As far as hard fork scheduling, that I think is important to target.
Okay. So yeah, I agree that we need to figure that out. Would there be an appetite for meeting in 1 week and fleshing out specifically this EIP after discussion on Gitter and Magicians? Who would be able to come to that?
Not me.
Yeah, I actually have a conflict too. This might have to wait for 2 weeks, and given the tech stuff, and that's unfortunate because of the timing of, that might put off some of the other discussions. But I guess this is the process now. If it doesn't get in at Berlin, it doesn't get in at Berlin. We can only do so much with the time we have. James, if it's okay with you, I was wanting to get the OpenRPC discussion going if that person is still here, because we promised last time that they'd be able to have a little bit of time, and we're at the end of the meeting again with like 8 minutes left. So I think that's Zach. Is that okay with you, James?
Yeah, I think we should do that, and then we should also discuss ProgPal. I know things might go over, but I think it's important to talk about as far as in conjunction with Berlin going in for ETH2 stuff. Anyway, continue, Zachary.
We'll do light discussion on ProgPal that won't be anything binding if people have to leave. So yeah, let's start with Zach though. Go right ahead.
Cool. Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, sorry I turned up a little bit late today, but yeah, glad to be here. So I just wanted to quickly maybe start by saying a little bit about what OpenRPC is. So yeah, OpenRPC is what is called a service description specification. So a way of describing a service. There's other ones that exist. OpenAPI is probably definitely the most popular one. And that's the one that I've used a lot in the past. And I found that there was some particular challenges when using OpenAPI with JSON RPC services, because OpenAPI is structured as this individual route. It's based on HTTP. It also has a lot of features that are specific to REST-based APIs. And so that's why we made OpenRPC, which we started out as a fork of OpenAPI and worked with the guys that maintain that to figure out basically how to set this thing up. And so, yeah, started out by deleting all the stuff that only pertain to REST. And the beauty of JSON RPC is really its simplicity. And you can really tell that by like how much stuff we are able to remove from OpenAPI. And we also worked a lot on tooling around it as well. So the motivation behind all of this is really, we wanted the same sort of tooling that you get from OpenAPI, but specific to JSON RPC. And there's a couple other things that we added in there as well, like the concept of service discovery maps really well onto JSON RPC, whereas for the OpenAPI stuff, they have ways of doing it, but it's a little bit different. And it's so like, for example, we have a rpc.discover, which is a method that you can add to your JSON RPC service. RPC dot being a reserved prefix for JSON RPC. And the idea there is that that method would return the service description for itself. And so you can sort of ask a service, hey, what methods do you have? You know, what parameters do they take? What do they return? So, you know, fundamentally, we built this stuff for JSON RPC, not for any particular one technology, just JSON RPC in general. Then, you know, of course, it has specific applications within blockchain because most crypto, you know, most blockchain clients use JSON RPC. But also, there's a lot of, say, like within Ethereum Classic, whichever, there's multiple client implementations all trying to, you know, hopefully adhere to some common base set of methods and interface, right? And maybe some clients add certain functionality and whatnot. But moreover, having a way to communicate these differences is really important. And so, yeah, that's pretty much the gist. We've put together a specification for Ethereum as like the base level set of methods for Ethereum. Haven't had too many eyes on it really, but we're using it inside of multigeth. So like multigeth is supporting those methods, and it's implementing the service discovery as well. But yeah, there's also like a lot of interest outside of blockchain as well. So yeah, happy to answer any questions that you have, and also really happy to help out. You know, hopefully make this tooling stuff work for you guys, or yeah, talk about it.
And just to make sure I understand, is the ask to implement this at the client level? And for those who might not be familiar, this is not a consensus breaking change, right? This is just like something at the like client level.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, definitely, it's at the client level. It also like, I guess I have a couple examples. I don't have the links handy right now, but one example of a way that it could be used is when proposing an ECI or an EIP. If the EIP includes a new JSON RPC method or a change to the existing JSON RPC method or something like that, it can be, you know, specified as in like a structured format. That's, you know, like you can just include the OpenRPC definition of the method, right? So that's quite nice. But aside from that, like, yeah, each client, it's up to them to implement this stuff or not. Like you said, it's not consensus breaking or anything like that. It's just something that, for example, with multigeth, whenever the, you know, specification changes, we just rerun the generator, and we get new clients for JavaScript and Rust right now, working towards Go and Python in the near future. But like, these are generic, right? So like, of course, you can generate clients for any JSON RPC API. Same with documentation. So yeah, the idea is to just save time and not really like force it onto anyone, I guess is a good way to put it. So like, there's no need for anyone to implement anything if you don't want to. It's just a tool.
Cool.
So
Anyone have questions, or Peter?
I have a small reaction. So generally, the problem with these generated APIs is, so before Ethereum, I used quite a lot and hacked quite a lot on Google APIs. And Google is famous for, they have these API descriptors. They are super complex. And you have API generators for pretty much everything. And essentially, I was using the Go APIs. And the problem is that, yes, you do get these APIs generated, but they are more or less useless on themselves because after the API reaches certain complexity, the generated code is just, you just essentially map function calls to, or API calls to, you just translate them to your language. But most often the user doesn't really want to do the low-level calls individually and assemble and pass in all the configurations.
that's
So
fair.
at the end of the day, you will need to write a proper client. And that was my experience.
I mean, agreed. There are some cases where the complexity is too great for a generated client to really fit the bill, but similar to in open API world, there's many REST sort of pattern, or there's many patterns that people use that don't necessarily fit REST or open API. And in that case, you either accommodate with by adding like plugin interfaces to the generators, or as you said, you're stuck with having to write your own. And if that is the case, that is the case, right? So, but certainly there's a lot of cases where what you want is just a very light wrapped interface to your methods that includes static typing and say like if it's a JS or JavaScript generated client, then you want like JS doc annotated functions, so that in your editor when you're calling like eth.call or whatever, you don't have to go look up the docs for how to use it, right? It's just your editor will tell you how to use it.
So if this is already in multi-geth, would that mean it works for geth already?
Yeah, certainly. So it should be the base level set of methods there.
So the thing is, I think we are happy to add the server side for this. I doubt that we will change in mainline geth. We won't necessarily change the client based on this, because I think we are still on that part that basically, like, we do have a handwritten client, which I think is basically includes the functionality that you would need to interact with the chain. And it's kind of, we do add to it from time to time, but it's not, in general, we're more trying to provide a stable sort of Go API instead of providing, like, even if the underlying mechanism changes, that is used by this particular Go API, and we do strive for the stable API on the client side also. And so I don't we'll be using the generator, but we're super happy to just add the like rpc.discover endpoint and return whatever stuff needs to be returned there. Like, that's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, cool. I mean, the intent is for this stuff, I guess, to highlight differences between clients, really. So if you're
so it would kind of mean though that we basically have to, because since the server that we use, I actually don't know if multi-get uses a different RPC server. I think it would be kind of silly, but
it uses the Go one.
Yeah. So what do you mean the Go one?
Like just the one that everyone uses. Like here, I'll pull it up. The same one as geth anyway.
Oh yeah. Okay. So the thing is that within that server implementation, it's kind of like we basically need to have a way to like auto-generate this like schema from the provided methods, and that's definitely something we are not doing right now.
Right. So it's a very good point that you brought up. So I'll first start by saying that we have a fella on our team named Isaac who is working on this stuff exactly. And what he's trying to do is, like infer from the code what the scheme, like what the document, like the service description document ought to look like. And so that's like sort of in the realm of like document introspection, which is definitely one avenue. Another one being like starting from the document and then updating the typed interfaces in your code, which breaks compilation. You go and fix it, and now everything's happy. Okay, you've implemented the change to the interface, right? So they're sort of two different schools of thought, I suppose.
So there is a big benefit to this. So the big benefit, if we go down the path where basically we would define the official sort of like Ethereum RPC interface as you have done, as a schema like that, then loading it into the server, we'd also be able to provide canonical parameter names, which is something that we cannot do right now. So at this time, all of the Ethereum methods are, by position, and that can actually be a bit of a hurdle because you actually have to remember which thing goes into which place. Some of the methods work around it by just taking an object as a parameter, but that's kind of a hack. So I do feel that like this is something that could provide like a big benefit to users of the RPC interface because they'd be able to use named parameters finally. And people have been requesting that feature for a long time.
Yep. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you nailed it there.
I want to time box this a bit.
Absolutely.
But Zach, if you could just tell us how to get in touch with you, or are you on the All Core Devs Getter? Or just basically how to get in touch with you or your team if people are interested in this.
That is a good question. GitHub is definitely the best place to chat about this stuff. If it's related to the specification, there's the OpenRPC/spec repo. Happy to chat there, entertain any questions. Otherwise, I'm on Telegram, Discord, Twitter, all that stuff.
Getter's mostly used for these type of things. Are you on there?
Yeah. So actually, we've been talking about this, sort of having the need to maybe start a Gitter for these exact reasons. So maybe I'll get to that this week or today and get back to you, perhaps.
Yeah,
maybe
feel free to come.
on that.
Feel free to come back and give any announcements of better communication methods, if you'd like. Even if it's not talking about the whole thing, y'all are always welcome here.
Oh, well, thank you very much for your time, and it was nice to meet some of you in East Denver last weekend. Yeah, thanks again.
All right, thanks, Zach. All right, on to Prague Pow. Thanks for staying over, everybody. James, did you or actually, I should put it this way, we could have James go ahead with it, or Martin, you put it on the agenda, so maybe it's better to hear what you wanted to do with it today and then go to James.
Yes, sorry. So my idea was basically, I think we should have another discussion of this proper and see what the next step is. I would, for example, propose that we launch a new testnet with the updated 0.9.3 implementation. And yeah, I don't really know where we're at in the discussion or in the decision-making process. I seem to recall we have decided it for implementation, but I don't know.
So, Andrea, I'm really sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Where do you see where we are in the process? If you have an opinion at all, just kind of put you on the spot there. We can't hear you if you're talking. You might be muted on your end.
No, we can't hear you.
Oh, okay. While you fix your mic, I think James had something to say too.
Yeah, so they have an 0.9.3 test net, or there's a mining. Oh, I think I can hear you now. You're just very quiet.
Yeah, if you can up your mic volume. Yeah, we still can't hear. Just go ahead, James.
Yeah, so they're the readiness of their, like, they have some testing, some test nets, or they're mining on the 093 spec, and it's, in my opinion, the closest EIP to being ready to launch. So as far as status of implementation, they're pretty much ready to go. If unless Andrea has an opposing opinion to that. I do have a proposal for a hard fork scheduling proposal for this, which is the BLS precompile getting in sometime for June, having a fork scheduled for that, as the whether it's with the 18 one whitelisted, or if it's in a specific, as if it's a specific precompile. The ETH2 team is working on that right now, and it's important that we get that done before the deposit contract so things can be validated on chain. Then for ProgPow and its inclusion, I would suggest that it is a contentious upgrade, but as I have done research and around that, there isn't the likelihood of a network split is very, very low, because I haven't actually seen someone willing to be on the other side of that. But I do agree that it is a contentious upgrade. So my proposal is that we have a fork for the BLS precompile, and then the next third Wednesday after that, we have a fork that includes only ProgPow, and that's the suggestion. And there's a lot to go on why. I don't think we have a lot of any more time to really go over that.
My main question is, when you say 3 weeks, is that we're testing them at the same time, but we're just including them in forks at different times in order to make sure people have the opportunity to fork off if they want to? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So Berlin would happen when the BLS precompile is ready, and then a ProgPow would happen the next third Wednesday after that.
Anybody have comments, concerns, etc.?
I'm concerned it's
I think that
much
makes
too
sense.
close. Oh, I think from a community perspective, and of people opposing ProgPow, I feel it like putting E2 and E2 like precompiles and ProgPow a month apart is kind of conceptually weird for some reason. I if you told me like 3 months or 2 months between the two, sure. I'm also unsure if, like, I know we've had a lot of discussions around like if people want ProgPow and or not and whatnot. And given how contentious it is, I'm personally a bit uneasy about including it. I think kind of deciding through a network split is far from ideal. So yeah, I'm a bit uneasy about ProgPow in general, but I'm especially uneasy about having it very close to an E2 related upgrade just because of the potential confusion.
So as far as the releases go, we could have the release for Berlin as soon as that's ready, and we could release the ProgPow one shortly afterwards. And it's more of giving it, if we wait another 3 months, then ProgPow eats up 6 months of our development cycle, where really ProgPow is actually the most ready to go out of any EAP right now. But the reason we aren't scheduling it is because of we don't want to just do the only ProgPow one first. So and as far as timing goes, getting the BLS signature, the precompile in is more important than having ProgPow come in first. And so having multiple releases before, and then having people choose upgrade to the one that they want, and that has already worked. And so it isn't like okay, once Berlin is done, then we'll release the version for ProgPow. It's more of we'll release everything for Berlin as soon as it's ready, and then we can release a ProgPow one shortly after and have people also upgrade that as the next one. But as far as fork activation happens, it would happen at that amount of time.
Yeah, and I mean 3 weeks. It's not like we're just trying to slip in ProgPow the day after and hope nobody notices. I mean, I don't really think. I think 3 weeks is sensible.
What about giving exchanges and other network service providers time to upgrade their clients twice? Is 3 weeks enough for that?
Well, I mean, they don't actually have to do that. We could bundle code-wise. It could all be implemented and activatable or deactivatable via switches. So if we just code it right, they wouldn't actually have to update the software twice.
So what I remember from the DAO is that there was a lot of pushback on a switch because that implies a default to the switch, whereas running an entire client where the default is one or the other is a much more explicit switch than having a software enabled switch that you have to like manually go in and do.
I mean, yeah. So the default obviously would be ProgPow because that's what we kind of decided, right?
Yeah, but then,
Yeah, if the exchanges and things they like to upgrade the moment before, and they're already have been shown to be capable with that in a much shorter and crazier timeline, which was Mirror Glacier. And if we did a release of Berlin and then a release of ProdPow, then that is people could just go to the release that they choose, and we would be supporting going to the ProdPow release.
I think one thing that's also worth considering is the exchange have the biggest incentive to support 2 coins, right? Like if Ethereum splits, the best, it's bad for everybody except exchange fees. And it's worth being mindful. This is basically how ETC came into existence.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just, I can absolutely see the first exchange. Once the first exchange is like, we'll let users decide, we'll run both ETH ProgPow and ETH hash, then it's almost like every other exchange has to do it because they end up competing for the fees, and we've kind of split the network. So again, this is kind of why I'm personally uneasy on this.
Yeah, and I understand that, and as I've read it from the community, there are people who oppose ProgPow, but their stance is that we would all go to the ProgPow state. We would all go to the non-ProgPow chain, and if that is actually the case, then there is no network split. There's just we go on with the one without ProgPow, or we go on the one without. And I have not seen any evidence that there is an ideological or people willing to step up to actually have a network split. And if I'm wrong about that, I'll resign as hard fork coordinator.
Yeah, that probably wouldn't be necessary. But what I'd say is I've seen very little. The only person, I can just call it out, I'll just say Amin's the only one who said they'd step up, and I'm not sure if they still have that position today. And even if they did, it just kind of seemed like, I don't know. I'm skeptical of that happening. But again, I don't want to I don't want to be proven wrong. But if I am, then that's just how things go. So
I think,
and I mean, I am serious that if I'm wrong about this, I would quit my job.
Please don't. Please, I would really like you to stay on. Okay, go ahead, Tim. What were you saying?
Yeah, I was gonna say another sort of ProgPow critic I found is like the Gnosis team, and Martin specifically, and I think it might be worth getting their thoughts on it on a core devs call, especially because they're going to be maintainers of Open Ethereum. I personally would feel much more comfortable with this plan if Gnosis as maintainers of Parity Ethereum or Open Ethereum say they're kind of okay with this. Like I know for a fact they don't actually. Martin is not Gnosis.
No, he's talking about the right one, and
Martin,
I have gone back and forth with him a lot on this.
Yeah,
and his view is that ProgPow would would be nothing, and we'd all be on the other side. So those are the two big objectors, and neither of them are saying yes. I will move forward with a network split.
Yeah. So I think again, I would be much more comfortable if Gnosis Martin K from Gnosis, agrees that like Open Ethereum will implement that and kind of be okay with it, even though say, he's personally somewhat opposed to it. Because I think that's the other kind of credible, like the two people.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we've had discussions back and forth. Everything that's going to be said has already been said. I think we kind of just need to go forward. That's my view.
Yeah, and I think
And I would
I
agree.
agree with that view. However, Tim, if you want to ask them and make sure they're aware of it, or at least Stefan um, from Gnosis,
Cool. Yeah.
yeah, just
I'll ping them.
feel free to ping them and like make sure that they know this is happening. Because the last thing, the thing that got me last time was people saying this is being snuck in. So I'm gonna make a effort to make sure that's not the case this time, as I'm sure James and others will do as well. And there'll be plenty of time for open dissent that won't really change the decision necessarily because we've already gone back and forth and approved it twice, but at least they'll be aware. So if people want to do that, they can. That's why forking off is the ultimate consensus mechanism.
Hey,
Or
Hudson.
Yeah.
Just a quick question: is there a better way to advertise this than through your Twitter account, like a more official venue?
Good call. I'd say I can't think of one. What about you?
The Ethereum blog. I mean, if you were really serious about this.
There are trade-offs to doing that, and when I say that, what I mean is it looks like it's an endorsement by the EF, which it really isn't because Geth acts autonomously from the EF, although it is funded by the EF. With as far as their decisions, as in no one outside the Geth team influences any or has ever influenced any decision for what goes into a network upgrade within the EF. So like Aya or any of that stuff they don't go in and be like you have to put this in. And so that would be one misconception. The other one would be giving it more. It would be kind of fanning the flames of something that like is not really needed to be fanned, but I'm open to other suggestions. If enough people want that to happen, I'm perfectly comfortable bringing that up to the other blog editors.
No, that's true. Good perspective.
Mine would be if you have grievances, come to me. I am taking responsibility for this.
To an extent, yeah.
As much as I can in my role, and I do listen, and I have had many of these conversations, and I look forward to having more of them. And I am essentially putting my reputation on the line for this decision.
So I do think that in an official-ish announcement of like the decision, this basically all quarters deciding that like the way forward is to include PropPal is kind of something that I feel like is newsworthy, and it's definitely something that can be announced on Ethereum block even without seeing it as an endorsement, because it's basically just documenting the fact that all quarters has collectively decided that PropPal is the way to go. And if the community doesn't accept PropPal and we all turn around and we're like, okay, maybe it wasn't such a good idea, and then we just go with the other chain, that's fine as well. But at least having like an explanatory write-up that on the blog that actually explains why PropPal was adopted, and like that it is being adopted because of the decision in all quarters, I think these things can just be included in the blog, and that it's not an endorsement.
Yeah, there's a happy medium we can definitely approach once things get closer, especially if we very early put a blog out there rather than like 2 weeks before, like I've been prone to doing.
I think we should probably do it now. I don't know if now is the right time or like after the next core devs call, but that seems like it's roughly the right period.
We should have it. We should have the. Next.
I think we should.
Call
I think we should do it after whatever BLS EIP is going in is decided, so we can make both announcements. So I'm not doing it EIP by EIP.
It's not that. It's not about the hard fork announcement. It's more about the the decision that the official decision is now PropPal will happen, and that doesn't really mean that's not a hard fork announcement. That's just an informational post.
Yeah, and when it will happen will be after this, the third. If we don't say when it happens, I don't think it will happen. So having it be the third Wednesday after the BLS precompile is a way of saying this is it. It is happening when it will happen.
Okay. We'll discuss this more next meeting because it's not going to happen before next meeting. And
Yeah.
I can definitely draft something up just so that we don't keep everyone here all day. And Artem makes a good point. That we should definitely invite Stefan and Amin if they want to come on and give their perspective of like why they would like that they're splitting, just so people are aware. But I'm going to talk to Amin and just see if what his position is now. He knows, I think he knows anyway that he can just come on and say that if he wants to. But that's kind of, I don't want to create drama for the sake of drama, so I'm avoiding that as much as possible while still giving people while still making sure people are aware of what's going on and giving them voice. So that's a hard thing to balance, and I think James is doing a good job of that, and I'm going to try to also do a good job of that. Any other final comments before we close out the meeting? And what we'll do is for the next meeting, let's look at what we missed this meeting and try to prioritize that, along with the BLS curve stuff, obviously. But it sounds like ETH Paris is going to be a big place where that's discussed. But if we can have an ETH2 person on next time, James, I know you were representing them, so actually that might be sufficient. But
yeah, next time we'll have someone, and the actual EAP will be written and finished.
Oh, great. Okay, that'll help a lot. So yeah, let's reprioritize the IPs next time so we're not leaving stuff out. And other than that, any other final comments?
I have a quick request.
Yeah.
So I know that, so it's been quite a while since we've had the EEP 778 and 868 merged. So this is something that to refresh you guys, this is Ethereum node records and the node discovery v4 ENR extension. These things have been live for quite a long time, and there is an implementation in Trinity, Geth, and and in Aleph, but we are not really seeing many other implementations on that. So it would be very useful to have these things, because we have just rolled out another critical piece of infrastructure that will deprecate the bootstrap nodes in the long term, and that is the DNS-based discovery. And I would really vouch for people, especially like client implementers, to go ahead and just add these features to the discovery implementations. They do not take a lot of time, but it would be very helpful for the network to find.
Okay. If I may, I have just finished working on ETH64 implementation for Open Ethereum, so it's just hit the master, and now I will also be working on Ethereum node records and integrating it into the Open Ethereum's network stack.
Oh, that's very nice. That is very, very nice. So do note that basically the just contact me if you have any questions regarding that. And I'm very happy that this is finally happening. And I can really recommend that you look into the Rust lippy2p repo, because they have already implemented all that stuff as part of the Discovery version 5 draft work. So you can just use the implementation from there. You don't have to implement ENR again.
In fact, I have been in contact with Sigma Prime, and they have and they have split their implementation of ENR into a separate crate. So we'll reuse it, and
Very,
see
very
how.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So Felix, if you could get on the All Core Devs Getter, put your specification and ways to contact you, and then tag Nethermind and Besu. That sounds like those are the ones that we are not accounted for if they've implemented this or not. Just if you could do that today or Monday, maybe. Monday might be better, so people are like not ending their day. That would be helpful.
So with these EEPs is basically the situation is a bit unclear anyway, because we have approved them on all core devs a long time ago, but the status in the EEP was never updated, so they're all still in draft. But actually, like we have discussed these EEPs 2 or 3 times on the all core devs, even more than a year ago, and by now, because the ENR was proposed in November 2017, right? So that is like more than 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of like it's been it's been around all this time, and I kind of feel like moving these things to final would be great. But also, I don't really know, like we still don't know what the process is for those networking things, because it's kind of like, is it moved to final when everyone has it, or is it moved to final when we've discussed it enough, or like,
Yeah,
nobody really.
there's a process being changed in the EIPs right now to make that more clear. There's EIP meetings, which are EIP improvement process meetings. So yeah, and you're welcome to come to those. They're every other Wednesday. But basically, right now, the next step, as the current system stands, would be to put it in final call or last call, which is a
Yeah, there's a
2 week
PR
period.
to do that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
I made a
James,
PR for that already.
yeah, James
It just needs
already
to be
put that
merged.
in. Yeah. So we're currently in the waiting for merge state.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Yeah, just ping me. I can merge it.
Okay.
Thanks, all. All right, any other final stuff? All right, we went over exactly half an hour. Not bad. All right, thanks everybody. Thank you, Artem, for your update. Artem, just for the record, you're on Open Ethereum. Are you with? I just totally forgot. Are you with Parity Technologies, or are you with a different team?
I'm from Gnosis actually.
Oh,
So
perfect.
I'm employed by Gnosis to work on Open Ethereum. So I'm the first of the hires, and we are currently expanding. So yeah, we're looking for more people.
Well, welcome.
Work on this.
Yeah, welcome to the calls. I think you've been on before a little bit, maybe, but yeah, my
Yeah, I
memory's
was just
terrible.
on mute. So
Okay, cool. All right, see you all in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.